Hello, how you doing? Today we're looking at PTZ cameras, pan, tilt and zoom cameras, as opposed to say mirrorless cameras or camcorders. Why people are now choosing PTZ cameras in lots of settings, from studios to house of worship, educational settings and live events. So I have a number of PTZ cameras I own from Alfatron. Got two of their HD 30 zooms, and they just sent me over their 4K to have a wee look at as well and test it out. This is their IP controller I own, which will control all that. So we'll jump into this world, why people are choosing PTZ cameras and what I think of these Alfatron models. So let's go there. One of the PTZ cameras on the table here, along with the mirrorless kit and a telephoto lens. I put one of the Alfatron cameras over to the side here and just mounted that so you can see from this angle, and I also keep one above me as well, just so you can see down on the table, and the kind of, yeah, if I want to talk about anything here, you can see it clearly. So what we're going to do is, in a wee minute, I'm going to cut to one of my local churches where I set up a tripod and a couple of these PTZs, and let you see the kind of, and to set it up different places, you know, at the back of the church, at the side, and you can sort of see the angle, sharpness, focus, zoom, all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to come back here, and we're going to talk about the connectivity in the back of this, the inputs and the outputs, what you can connect to the PTZs, what comes in the box, and then compare what's the differences between, it's like a mirrorless setup versus PTZ setup. And then, you know, the price points for them. And hopefully I'll give you enough information you can make a good informed choice. Do you want to go down the PTZ route or the mirrorless route, or a little bit of a hybrid situation? So yeah, that's where we're going to go with this. So let's cut to my local church first and look at some of the B-roll.
Okay, this is the Alfatron 4K camera, and I've got it scaled down to 1080p just for this. But the color tones are grand. It's more or less what I'm seeing with my eye. There's no house lights on here. This is just the sun washing through the stained glass windows. And then at the back of the church, I have just set up the 30 times zoom, which is the HD camera. I'll just pull around and focus on this so you can see it. And again, the 4K and the HD both can zoom from the back of the church right to the front. So it's about 30 feet or so. This is my son. And this is just using the HD camera. Now again, the light's a wee bit, you're seeing the sort of ambient tinge coming a little bit off the wood and the stained glass windows, so things seem a bit orange there. So this is where profile lighting really helps. If you've got some ellipsoidal or Fresnel lights you can put in, you can help the sensor out here, because when you zoom in, the aperture is going to be a lot smaller, and that's where you need them spots. Now see how bright this is? Now this is the 4K. So it's sharper, there's more light getting in here. And then when you zoom in, it gets slightly darker, but it's still a lot better than you've seen in the HD version there. So in both of these cases, for this church, I would recommend getting some profile ellipsoidal sort of theatre lighting at the front, rather than just sort of general wash lights. It needs to be a bit more directional, just to compensate for the ambient light in the room and the colours bouncing off the wood as well. Now you can see how dark this is, and again that's what it zoomed right in, but look, when I just pull out a little, how much light floods into the HD sensor here. And again, that's why lighting is really key. So there's just a wee bit of wash light there, you can see the sensor just trying to adjust itself. And again, that's where presets are important. If you've got a couple of cameras, you can have that already wide open and then just cut to it, and then people don't get distracted by these wee flickers and things that you see. Pan's nice and smooth. You can adjust the speed on the cameras. It's just very obvious, the 4K camera versus the HD, with the new chip in it and just a better megapixels and amount of light getting through to the sensor. So the color depth's better, sort of shades from black to white, just the skin tones are better all around, and that's fair enough for the price point that it is. And again, I'll just show you again when you swap to the HD camera and when you see the 4K in comparison to that. Now that's the HD one. See how dark that was? That's 2 megapixels. And again, that would be sorted easily with some profile, ellipsoidal or Fresnel lights just there. So there's only so much a sensor can do. Even with the 4K, it'll struggle if that area is not lit. And again, I have no lights on there at all. That's just ambient light coming through in the church. It's still quite impressive considering there's no lights at all on there. But when it's dark like that, it can start to get grainy if you don't have any lights on it. Okay, let's just look at the HD camera here, and specifically the sort of the orange tones that's coming through and the ambient light bouncing off the wood and through the stained glass windows. You can see it more obvious here. You can see it on the back right hand corner of the wall. You can see it coming through the stained glass window, and then the sensor's just picking all that up. And then it can't really just wash that out. Again, lights are important, but watch how the 4K camera handles it when it's in a different angle. We see the skin tone, so that's amazing. The difference there is great. It's more true to the eye. So let's go back to the studio and talk about that.
Okay, hope you like the footage there in St. Anthony's Church. Thank you to the priest there for letting us get in there and do that. Appreciate that. I've set out a table here because I want to try and communicate how we work out the quality of an image and versus the price point. And you need to know a number of things to do that. So this wee bit here, I'm going to take you through a few things. Let's just look at this wee slide. Going to look at the factors that impact image quality. So that's the sensors, type, size, megapixels, and pixel pitch or photosites. And I'll explain what they are as we go along. The lenses, optics, so the glass in it, the quality of that, and the aperture. Then the processor chip, how it processes the bit rate, how much data it can contain inside the different codecs, whether that be 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit, etc. So from ProRes to RAW to JPEGs, all that kind of stuff, you need to know that the chip can handle a certain amount of information and process it. Then there's the color bit depth, which is the amount of sort of shades that go into that there wee codec. So you've got, I think 8-bit is about 250 shades between the sort of black and the white. And then you go into 10-bit, there's a lot more. So the skin tones and the colors and managing that, the tones are going to be a lot better. So that factors into it. And then kind of how you resolve all that is also impacted by the lighting, because these sensors are all different size, and all the sensors, no matter what size, all need good lighting. Obviously, if they're smaller, they're going to need more, but then some of the smaller ones have a few wee tricks up their sleeves that they're doing to compensate for the not having such a large sensor, and I'll explain that as we go along. So let's jump into it. Let's start with sensor type, sizes, megapixels, and pixel pitch. Okay, that's the first part of this. If you can get that information into your head, it'll help you process why all these different sensors and cameras are valued the way they are. So on the table here, there are a number of things from we action cameras, your DJI, we compact cameras, my big
Professional lenses.
and also some smartphone cameras and how they've sort of progressed over the years. As you remember how film kind of started off with the film tape, 35mm, you opened up your shutter, in came the light, and then the chemicals on that tape responded to the light and you got your negative black and white photographs, and then they learned how to do that for color and putting color over it. So it moved from there once transistor technology took off, and the reason why I'm telling this bit of history will make sense in a minute. They came up with these glass vacuum tubes, and this is where we get the measurements for our sensor size, because so sometimes when you're reading the sensor size, you're confused. It says 1/2.3, 2.5, 1.8, and you're going, what's that all about? And it's based on these original glass vacuum tubes, which used to put it in this, all the different cameras, Hitachi, Panasonic, all the rest of the different brands, and then your television sets, and hence you had them big back ends to your television sets in the 80s and so on. But now we've got obviously these nice flat LED screens and all the rest of it. And that's because they moved the technology on a lot more when it came to transistors. But it's based on that. So let me explain to you how this works. Here's a couple of the tubes I have. And these are 1-inch sensors on the diameter. But the sensor is not actually the diameter, that's just the tube that holds it, but they measure it and refer to it as 1 inch. But the actual active part of the sensor is cropped in within that.
that's the crop factor. So you've got your 1-inch tube, then you've got the active part within that, and then the crop factor is the size of the square part inside that. And that's what they're referring to when they say 1/2.3 crop or 2/3 crop or something like that. And it's all based around this original glass vacuum tube. So as I said, they moved on to transistors, and people are starting to sort of refer to the sensors a little bit more in sort of millimeters squared, because it just makes more sense to people rather than worrying about, you know, what this one slice is. But you'll see both of them at the minute currently. So transistor technology moved on, and you've seen all that get into be able to do smaller devices, everything from smartphones, action phones, compact cameras, PTZ cameras, and so on. So let's look at this. Here's a wee 1-inch sensor I have on the desk here. And again, it's just based on that glass vacuum tube sensor. And it's 1 inch, or what is it, 25.4 millimeters squared is what the actual active part of this. Well, no, that's the frame again around that, not the active part. And then it's slightly cropped in from there. So here's a wee visual for that. So here's a 2/3 crop on a 1-inch sensor. So it's 1 2/3. Same principle as the glass vacuum tube. So just to pay attention to that. So when you see the size of the sensor, and it's been interesting to hear that DJI just come out with their Osmo Pocket 3, and I have their version 1, but this version 3 has a 1-inch sensor in it, which is interesting to me. So I'll be interested to see the quality of that. But when you look at, you know, action cameras, GoPros and DJI and all do them on different brands, and then you get your smartphones, and you can start to see the size differences in the lenses, and you can start to see the size differences in the sensors. So here's a couple of small sensors on the table here. And you can see, if it's starting with my iPhone 3GS, which was the first one I moved on to from my compact camera. So the compact camera might have been 4 megapixels. The iPhone was 3.5 or something, I think, originally. Then it moved up into 5, moved up into the 11 Pro Max, and that was a big upgrade where they gave you 3 lenses and 3 sensors within it. And they were trying to do what photography and videography people do, is the holy grail, the sensor, the holy trinity. You have your telephoto zoom, you have your wide angle for landscape, and then your portrait sort of macro ones for close-ups. And that's all they were doing in this here. They were trying to put them 3 in, but it's telephoto, not tele-zoom. So in the PTZs, they're zooming all the way in and zooming all the way out. Where the telephoto, when it wants to go in, it jumps to the other lens, and it sort of tricks you, the idea that you think you're zooming in, but you're actually just jumping to a different lens with a different focal length on it. So just know the difference between telephoto versus telezoom, and PTZ cameras, pan, tilt, and zoom cameras are literally zooming, hence the Z. So if you imagine your lens around this, and then them sensors, the flat transistor ones, then get into our full frame cameras. So I have a Sony FX3, which is a full frame sensor in it. I also have a G Master lens on it, a 24mm, which is kind of a wide angle, so you get this shot here, just framed with the panels and lights and screen and stuff with me. So the one beside it is my A7 III, and it has a slightly cropped sensor. And so I had to put the ISO up on this here. So will you see the difference in the quality? So this one is very sharp. There's good lens on this as well. But there's a little bit more grain in that just because I had to compensate for the sensor being a different size. I'm not sure if YouTube's going to translate that, but I can see the difference. And then, so let's go to the PTZ one, which I have in the corner by Alfatron. And again, that's only a HD, and it's only 2 megapixels, and I'll explain the difference and why this is important later when you get the pixel pitch. But the colors are fine, the focus is grand. So let me just show you them 3 cameras again. So number 1, the most sharpest, that's the full frame sensor with a high quality sort of optics lens on it. Then this is slightly more cropped sensor on my A7 III, and then say the very small sensor on my Alfatron. But it's still good quality because lighting is key, and I'll come back to lighting later, why that's important when you've got lower megapixels and so on. So lenses, just to communicate this again, the optics, and say this G Master lens for my Sony FX3, this is about £2,500 for this lens, so that I can zoom in sort of 20mm, 200mm, and then my full frame sensor, and the body on that is worth 4,000. So just that camera body and this lens is 6,500, as opposed to say the HD camera here, which is about 1,000, 1,500, or the 4K version of it, it's about 2,000, 2,500 thereabouts. So you're going to see there's I can get 2 or 3 of these instead of just having one camera, and so I get different angles. So if there's people in the way, I can cut to another angle. Because even if you can pan, tilt, and zoom, you get different angles and do presets. That's grand. But if there's people in the way, you need the cameras for different angles and different venues. So if your budget's £10,000, you're thinking, okay, I want different angles, but I can't afford the top end PTZs. So give an example. So Sony's FR7 is a £10,000 PTZ, but it's a full frame sensor. Where the ones in the Alfatron here, I think they're about 1.8 or so. I'll show you that in the chart at the end just to clarify. So it's cropped, and on the HD it's only 2 megapixels, but on the 4K it's 8.5, and the pixel pitches are different in both of them as well, and you'll see that in the quality of the image. And when I show you more footage later, when I go to this more modern church, you'll see the difference in the tone and the bit depth of the color and that, and how it manages that. But just to point out, the reason why I'm saying all that is the optics in the glass are important. How it's polished, how it's manufactured, its focal point down onto the sensor, and then how the sensor captures that, and then the chip processes all the different compositions around that. So here's a wee picture just showing you that glass getting done, and it's just like our eyesight. When we're trying to sort of squint and focus, that's all the lens is doing. And if I close my eyelids slightly, it's a bit like closing the iris and lowering the aperture on it, and I'll explain that in a wee second when I come to apertures. So just be conscious of that. There's difference obviously in the size of the lenses, the glass, and the price points, and the quality of them. So that's kind of where you need to sort of factor all these things in. So I'll just reiterate that again. Let's just look at iPhone, for example. As I said about the 3GS, look how small the camera is on that when you look at it. Now when you look at the 5, camera steps up. You look at the 11 Pro Max with the 3 lenses and 3 sensors in it, and it's giving you that telephoto, the wide angle for scenery, and then your sort of macro portrait kind of photographs. And then when you get to the iPhone 15 Pro Max, again, the lenses are bigger again, and you can see the difference there, and the sensors are bigger again. It's amazing just how much a small, if it's broader, the diameter is bigger, how much more light's getting in even these smartphones. Now they're doing some clever things around compositional photography, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But let's just explain iris first. Iris is about how much light you're letting in. So obviously my eyes are shut, no light's getting in, I can see nothing. But as I slowly open them up, things become brighter. And that's all that's happening within the lens. So here's an example of all the different blades you find within a camera lens. And then when you open that up, that's the sensor opened up. So let me show you that. So when it's fully opened, so different lenses have different apertures on the PTZs and some of the G Masters and so on. The same with smartphones. You need to check the settings, what the features are on it. One of my lenses is f1.4 2.8, and that's the blades retracted all the way out, and then you're getting the most light into your sensor. So when you stop up, even though when you see the numbers going up, that's what they're talking about. That's called your f-stop, and that's when the blades start to come in and limit the level of light coming in, which normally happens when you're zooming in because the actual lenses are moving forward and back inside the cylinder that the glass is in, and it's getting the focus. Same with the zoom lenses. So that's what's happening with the iris, and that's what your aperture is about, how much light you're letting into the sensor. And that becomes an issue when it comes to pixel pitch and what size it should be. Because if it's low light, you want a bigger pixel pitch so that it can get a clearer image. So here's another graphic with that. Iris is closed, the light beams are narrower down onto the lens, and if it's a smaller sensor, then that's going to be an issue as well.
So here's a graphic of a fixed lens that's been sliced right down the middle, and you can see all the different elements within it. The concave and the convex lenses. There's 1, 2, 3, right up to 9 different elements of lens that have been highly polished and are focusing the light and the image all the way back to the sensor.
And it's the same in your smartphones when you look at how they have their they say 6 to 8 elements in them. And here's another graphic of that. All of that is to help focus it right back to the wee small crop sensor on your smartphones or action cameras or so on. And that's what's happening here. So again, the size of that glass compared to these big professional lenses are a lot different. The size of the sensors on the full frame mirrorless cameras versus on these smaller ones, it's harder for the physics to get around that. But they are, as I said, doing some clever things around compositional photography and some of the AI around high dynamic range. So when you're looking at all these cameras, they're used for different things. Obviously, the mirrorless ones are great for run and gun photography, and if you've got a big sensor, then you can shoot well in low light. But light is still key, even when you're out and about shooting. And as opposed to an action camera, which is more for you don't worry about getting wet or getting in water and so on. And then your smartphone's your day-to-day sort of photography stuff. So let me explain photo pitch before we get into lighting, and we'll go to the other church and show you some more of this footage in a more modern church. So pixel pitch works like this. It's measured in microns, which is the unit for that is UM. And so you'll find some of the earlier smartphones, the pixel pitch was 0.9 microns. And you'll see it when you start looking for it now. You'll see 1.1, 3, 3.5, whatever, 5. And that's just, again, pointing out the size of the pixel pitch. A couple of years ago, Philip Bloom, the DP videographer from the UK, did a great bit of footage. You can see it on YouTube. I'll probably put a wee link in the description. Shooting Brighton Pier at night with Sony's new A7S. And it was only 12 megapixels, but what you couldn't see with the naked eye, when he turned the ISO up inside the A7S, which you could actually start to see everything, and it wasn't that noisy as far as the grain for it being nighttime. And people were kind of amazed it was only 12 megapixels. And so he demonstrated really, because on the A7S, the pixel pitch was 8.4. Again, it was a bigger, it's like another wee iris with on and them photosites. When they're totally opened up, it's letting a lot more light in. And that's what was happening in the A7S and other versions of that since. So it's the same with them photosites. The smaller the photosites are, the less light it gets in, and it's harder for the sensor to interpret that. And then the picture starts to get grainy, and then you try to pump up the ISO and it gets worse and so on. So again, there's a lot of factors playing into how you get a quality sharp image. And I'm just telling you parts of that.
So what smartphones do and cameras with smaller sensors is they do a thing called pixel binning, where they group a number of the photosites or pixel pitches together and it interprets it as a larger photosite.
And then sort of doing the computational photography around that and joining up the dots to get a higher dynamic range in there, and so the colors from black to white are managed better. So there's ways that smaller sensors are doing that, and technology is moving on and advancing, and you're going to see some new advances in lenses going forward with these new meta services and nanotechnology, bringing in metalenses and how they're cutting off some of the convex bits and keeping the thinner bits and getting smaller lenses. But don't want to get too geeky on this, but just let you know there's stuff coming. So chips and processors, again, how they process all the compositional photography, the dynamic range, the bit rates, the containers that they all hold, all this, the codecs in, from JPEG and photographs to .mov or MPEG-4 right up to ProRes or RAW footage. And again, it's going to take a lot more bits to manage that so fast, but these processing chips are getting faster and faster. The new one on the 4K is a lot better and sharper as well. It's a more modern one than on the HD one, and again, you'll see that in the different bits of footage I show you. You can see the sharpness, the megapixels playing into it, and part of the chip processing it as well. So we get our security cameras, our compact cameras, our smartphones, our action cameras, and then we're trying to work out where does PTZ fall in this. Sensors are small, but the technology and the pixel pitch play a factor in it, and the megapixels to a point play a point in it. If I'm doing photography, megapixels count. Say I want to blow up a big poster to fill a building. If I don't have a high megapixel, it can't do the detail, and then when you blow it right up, it gets very pixelated and grainy. So what you're finding is it's not the same with videography and stuff like that. You want a sort of mid-range. Who did it? Marcus Brownlee recently just did a survey for a couple of million people, or million odd people had to grade and vote on what they thought was the better images on the different smartphones. Some of them had anywhere from 2 megapixels right up to 48 or more, and the ones that came out as the best results were the ones around the 12. So that mid-range And when you're finding 8.5, that's sensible at this price point for the Alfatron one. So the 12 megapixels one on the smartphone versus the 48 one, because again, it wasn't just about megapixels, it was about how you were processing the compositional photography, which is basically taking about 10 photographs at the same time, one overexposed, one underexposed, and all these different places in between, managing the tones, the color tones, and blending, and how the computer works through all that, or the chip works through all the compositions around that, and does that instantly. So these are things you're factoring in, and it's hard to get calculating that, but you start to see it in the quality of the image. So before I go to lighting, let's just go to this other church. This is Emmanuel Church, and I'm going to show you some of the footage in there. Different lighting, I haven't invested in all the lighting, but I'll say more about that in a second.
Okay, this is just a new build, and they were still renovating it when I came into it, so I was grateful they let me in to film in it. They have a triple projection screen going on here, and this is just the house lighting on, and then that's just some of the show lighting as well as the house lighting on. So as I said, it's a triple wide screen with 3 projectors, and I want you just to see how it's picking up text and tone and color between the show lighting and the text on the screen. Okay, that's me with the HD camera. When I cut to the left hand side of the stage, that's going to be the HD camera you see. But I'm shooting with the 4K scaled down the HD so I can compare like for like. So let's just zoom out, the 4K scaled down and have a wee look at that so you can see what it looks like. I want you to pay attention to the strip lighting round behind the screen and where the how the bleed off and the wash off on that looks between the two different cameras. So this is truer to my naked eye. What you're seeing with the 4K is what I was kind of seeing with my eyes. And so the tones and shades were more accurate. But saying that, sometimes when I cut to the HD version, it might be a wee bit more saturated at times, but it looked pleasant on the camera. So this is the 4K, as I said, scaled down. So we can compare like for like. And then when I zoom in, remember this is HD zooming in versus 4K. So it's going to look a wee bit softer as opposed to it being 4K resolution. Back to the HD, nice and crisp. Again, then purple's just washed down more. It's picking up more of the coloured lighting in the room on my face, so the tones are a bit more saturated there too. That's not really the camera's issue, they just need stronger profile lights that will remove the wash from the coloured lights on people's skin, so to get better skin tones. So I like the look of the HD, it's nice and crisp, picking up the text grand, and the 4K, as I said, is more accurate to my eye and what I was seeing in the room. And so when you get lighting and you get your whatever camera you pick, you got to sort of play around with the lighting, play around with the saturation and the tones until you get the look that you're happy with for your streams and your broadcasts. The HD camera, the black and white looks stronger, but in reality it's more like this, the slightly pastel in look, and that's what it looks like to the naked eye. So you get that more wash coming off the strip, less wash coming off the strip here. But again, that's more accurate to the eye. But to me, they're two different aesthetics. They're pleasing, but depending on what look you're going for, that's down to your own choice and preference. I was happy with the tones here. 4K was crisp. Text is fine. And obviously when you've got people on the front of the stage, that's clean too. So what's needed in this venue is a bit like the first church I showed you. People need better profile lighting or theatre lighting. Get the LED ellipsoidal or Fresnel lights with the barn doors. That way you can control it, get the focus right, and remove the bleed from the coloured wash lights onto people's skin tones. Okay, let's just return back to the studio and we talk more about this.
Okay, welcome back. So you can see the difference there. Obviously the 4K, sharper, crisper, and the tones were a lot better. But no matter what, in all these venues, no matter what I'm doing, even if you're in a big massive film set with cameras that are worth 50, 60, 80 grand and the lens is worth something similar, all of them have lighting. So think about all the places that lighting you don't even think about is happening. So let's say you take your home, for example, all the lights you have in there. If you imagine trying to take birthday photographs and you haven't got the lights on, your pictures don't really work very well on your smartphones and so on. So we have mood lighting that trains the atmosphere and the environment, make it feel warm. You can have warm light, cold light. And we're talking about that. And from a filming point of view, we're talking about bicolor lights. And some of them are softer. You can dim them and you can lower them and higher them depending on how much brightness you want. And again, that's a bit like helping the aperture out. You're opening up more light, making it easier on the sensor on your cameras. We see it when we're out shooting nature. You get a ray of sun on something, you try to shoot that, and it just lights the whole thing up for you and it looks beautiful. And it's the same when we're photographing people or subjects, whether it be in a house of worship or an event or an educational setting. We need lights to light people up, and we need them lights to have the right ability to manage skin tone, and then for the camera and the sensor and the chip to process the resolution of all that to make it a good color. So film lighting is slightly different. So you think of concerts and how many lights they have on the stage. These are the kind of lights we need to start to bring into the churches, and you'll see it in the more modern ones they're putting them in. We just haven't really been thinking about filming until more recently in churches. So let me give an example of a couple of ones I own. These are your big profile lights, or ellipsoidal, and then there's also Fresnel lights, which I'll show you again in a second. But again, think of the context. You're using lights in your home. You use them in film studios. No matter how, expensive the camera lens is, as I said, they still have to bring light into it. So don't think you don't need lighting for these cameras. If it's not lit well, your camera's no good to you. And you can see all these guys bringing in more and more lights depending on how big the area they have to light up and how bright it's got to be. And it's exactly the same with houses and worship. You need LED profiles or ellipsoidal or Fresnel lights, which is more your theater type lights you've seen in concerts and so on. And they have more focus, and they don't just wash and bleach everything, but they're more focused, and that's very helpful as far as the quality of that light, and then also how it matches people's skin tones, and it's the same sort of tones that you see with your naked eye. So Source 4 is one of the big ones. Again, if you're going to buy them in the future, buy LED ones, save your electric bill, don't be buying tungsten ones, it costs too much to run them. The one I have there is by Pro Lights, and it manages skin tones really well. And again, there's different price points for these, from 300 to 2,000, depending on what quality and what brand you go for. The Fresnel lights, they're slightly different. You get a bit of focus and a bit of spot on them Fresnels, and you've got different sizes, not as big as the big profile ellipsoidal ones. They're the really fancy ones. But these are great also for just getting some light. If budget's limited, and you can put some of these in your churches, and you're going to get a good effect for your camera to pick up the light as well. There's some brands, Elation doing one as well, and dynamic white light. Again, you can get bicolor or you can get white, and then it's about having a wee control desk for them lights and doing presets on them, so your tech team can operate them, or you can just turn it all on and have it all set the way you want. So all that plays back into your camera, into your sensors, into the sort of all the things you have to factor in on how good the image quality is. And that's what I was trying to work out with all this here. What do I think of these PTZs? They're in the 1,000 to 3,000 range, and there's a lot of cameras in around that. And so I had to try to work out, okay, what size was their sensor? How are they processing it? What's the megapixels? What's the pixel pitch? What's the optics like? How's the chip processing all these different elements, the zoom, pan, all that. So here's the graphics that kind of puts where the sensor is. And then the other factor I had to factor in cost was actually the support and the warranty, which I thought was a big plus in this one. As I said, it comes out of the box with 7 years warranty for their new PTZs. And if you register for that, you get up to 10 years warranty, and that is really, really good. So as I said, there's my Sony FX3. That's a full frame sensor there, and you can see where the different cameras fall as far as size of sensor and so on. And then lastly, all the points you got to factor in, as I said, sensor size and type, megapixels and pixel pitch, the processor chip, how it manages all the computations getting in there, the megapixels for the sharpness, but pixel pitch for low light, having bigger pixel pitch. Then the software, how it processes all your pans, tilts and zooms. Is it smooth? How's the math for that? What's it like panning in and panning out? And you always find you're getting firmware updates for all these things as they get better, and the engineers are working on that. Then the aperture, what's the aperture like? Letting light in, what's it like when you tele zoom way in, say you're at the back of a venue and you're trying to zoom in and it gets very dark? Do you have good lights to light the people up so that the sensor isn't getting grainy when you're doing that? And again, then there's just all the connection points. Obviously on your wee GoPro camera, you get a USB-C coming out of that. On my full frame camera here, I've got HDMI coming out. But on the likes of these PTZ, you've HDMI, SDI, NDI, Ethernet, powered over Ethernet, and different control protocols and stuff. So you're getting a lot of different features on that. Again, it's a different use case scenario. And say this run and gun camera, if I was shooting that for a wee documentary or something like that. So again, you just got to factor all that in, look at the price point, and then I just use this wee price and quality chart. You kind of think, okay, the cheaper PTZs will be down around 300, 700 pound. You get wee security cameras people use for 50 quid, but the features you get on them, the optics, the lens, the sensors are a lot more limited. So around the 1,000 to 3,000, they seemed reasonable to me. As far as price point goes, with the 7-year warranty, that seemed actually cheap. And then, say, if you compare that to the Sony FR7, which is £10,000, it's the best quality as far as sensor and stuff goes, but it's definitely the most expensive. So the sweet spot in this is obviously the star in the corner. So that's kind of where I've put them two cameras. The HD one, if I had a £10,000 budget and I wanted to put that into a house of worship or something like that, I'd be thinking, okay, I could get 3 or 4 of them versus buying a Sony FX3 and I get all these different angles, get the IP, and then invest the rest in good lighting. That's going to be more important. Even in this studio, lighting is the key, even with a very good camera in front of me here. And it's the same with these PTZs. And again, just to show you it in the studio, there's number 1 camera, number 2 is the A7 III. Number 3 is the HD one over there with only 2 megapixels, but because the light's fine, it's managing it really well as far as colors and focus and so on. So that's where I'll put it. I hope that makes sense. So let's just summarize that all again.
Okay, so it's the sensor type and size. If it's a smaller sensor, you're going to need better lighting. The processing chip to handle bitrate, the codec containers, and the color bit depth. The difference between megapixels giving you sharpness versus pixel pitch, needing bigger pixel pitch if it's a darker room or get better lighting. The software features from white balance, ISO, the speed control, then the lens and the optics, the aperture, how much light you can let in the wide angle and in the tele zoom. The motors and the math around that for the smoothness and the speed. Then all the connectivity points. You've got the issue of HDMI, SDI, NDI, powered over Ethernet, and so on.
And then with all of these cameras, no matter what one you're doing, if you're being serious about videoing, put some money aside for lighting. And you can't really blame the camera, even if you've got a 50 grand camera and a 50 grand lens. As I said, in movie sets, all the rest of it, lighting is still there. So the same with these PTZs and all your venues and events. Put some money aside for lighting and it'll make the image clearer and sharper. And then the price point goes up, obviously, the bigger the sensor after that. So think through your budget. Think what your use case scenario is. Do you want to have people operating them, or do you want to have them mounted out of the way if it's in a house of worship or on a stage and you're thinking, I'll just mount it to trussing or whatever, and then just control it with an operator at the front of the house or in your wee tech booth or wherever you're at. So that's how I process that. And I've got obviously different cameras for different situations. And I hope that's helpful, guys. Listen, if this was valuable to you, could you please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell? I'm trying to get my subscription base up. So thousands have been watching these videos, which is lovely. But I'm not above the rate yet. I've got to get above 1,000 before they monetize the channel. And then so I can start to pay for the time. I'd really appreciate it. Any questions, leave them in the comments. Any thoughts? Sure, we'll chat there. Have a great day. All the best. Bye.